I'm just going to wait one more minute to give people a chance to come in, because I know everyone's dying to hear from me. This is an hour with Mark Leslie, isn't it? Yeah, I'm pretty excited. Oh, you leave now while you have a chance. That's my publisher. Smart ass. Oh, this is being recorded. Smart bum. See, Randy's afraid to come in. No. I know. He's a busy man. Thank you. This has been a fantastic conference. This is amazing. Applause for Randy and all of the wonderful volunteers for When Words Collide. I'm not surprised it's sold out. Oh, Randy's going to say something. Randy, would you like to say something?
Thank you very much. But Mark could come here and speak to an empty room, but the room's not empty. So thank you for coming out this weekend.
I speak to lots of empty rooms. I've done book signings where I just tell people where the bathroom is or where the fiction section is. But that's not bad because I get to write while I'm there. So it's good opportunity. So my name is Mark Leslie Lefebvre. I write under the name Mark Leslie because I think it's unfair and cruel and unusual punishment to try to get people to pronounce or spell Lefebvre. But I do use that name because my mom would disown me if I didn't use the name Lefebvre. And I'm usually known in the book industry as Mark Lefebvre because that extra 2 syllables to add Leslie in there is just a little bit too much. But I am a writer, also an editor, and I have been in the book industry since 1992, and I've worked in virtually every single bookstore imaginable, from a mall store to a large format box store to a independently owned store to academic bookstore to online bookstore, Chapters Indigo. Worked at their head office for 7 years as the guy in charge of data integrity. I was there when publishers would send their catalogs to our team, and we had a team of 20 people who would data enter all the titles into our catalog. They would ship us boxes of books so we could scan the front cover of the book so we could have images to put on the website, even though there was a marketing department that had designed a book and had a file, but they didn't know how to send us JPEGs because those departments never talked to one another. I had 5 people whose job was nothing more than to scan books so we could have the book cover. Because in the early days of online book selling, we knew that books were 10 times likelier to sell if you could actually see a book cover. The same holds true today, in that a book is more likely to sell with a book cover, but it's even more likely to sell if your book cover is attractive to the target audience that you're shooting for. So an amazing cover that doesn't appeal to a romance reader will not sell if it doesn't appeal to the specific targeted readers. It doesn't have to be a good cover. It has to be a good cover for who your target audience is. And that's why one of the things I always say when people say, how do I sell a book? The first question I will always go back to is, who is your target audience? And if you don't know who your target audience is, how could you possibly spend a dime in marketing without knowing who you're marketing it for? And that's one of the go-to things that I've always said. So I've been in the book industry for a long, long time. I have been the president of the Canadian Booksellers Association. I did just retire from the board of directors for BookNet Canada. BookNet Canada is sort of a beautiful organization in Canada that brings booksellers, publishers, distributors, libraries, wholesalers all together for the betterment of the supply chain in Canada, for data quality standards. They represent Canada on the International Book Industry Standards Advisory Committee, or the BISG. BISAC is where you may have heard BISAC code as a code for subjects for books, or you may not have. But they sit on the committee in New York to talk about data standards. When I went there for the first time, when I used to sit on that committee, it was to fight for the fact that in the book industry subject code classification, there's 3,500 different codes, and every year they update them and change them based on actual books that are being published and the need for these new categories that come and go and become popular. But in the U.S., there were 15 categories for different types of books on baseball. There was one for hockey. So I went down to the U.S. and I made 2 more for hockey. So you can thank me for that. Thank you. So, damn them. Lord Stanley was rolling over in his grave. They don't even know he was Canadian, and they sometimes get the cup down there. So I was attracted to the book-selling industry because I've always wanted to be a writer. I've always enjoyed storytelling. I used to tell stories using Fisher-Price figures when I was a kid. I discovered the joy and beauty of permanence of putting words down on paper, walking away, and somebody else could discover them, and then throw them in the garbage. No, it was usually my mom who would say, "Why can't you write a nice romance story instead of these scary, spooky tales that you tell?" I sold my first story in 1992. It was a young adult humor adventure called The Progressive Sidetrack. I got $5 and a contributor's copy of the magazine. It was chapter 1. It was a digest-sized magazine. Never actually got my money, but I was so happy to get my book in print, or my first story in print. And it was really just a rip-off of when I was president of the student council. And it's a story about a guy who's just trying to ask a girl out on a date, which I was never good at. And he has a crush on her, and he wants to ask her on a date, but in his role as president, he has all of these things that keep happening, and things are going wrong. And it's kind of like the editor who read it said, I've never seen the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off, but this is what it reminds me of, because he's skipping classes and doing stuff. And all he really wants to do is ask her to the dance before the dance that night. He wants to get to it because, he's a procrastinator like me. And it was kind of fun. So my very, very first story was a YA humor piece. And then the second story I sold was a horror story to a magazine called Wicked Mystic, and it was called Phantom Mitch. And the concept was the idea of a phantom itch. And the opening line was Barry could touch his wife beyond the grave. She had died in an accident, the same accident where he lost his arm. The concept of a phantom itch is that you can still feel an itch on an appendage that doesn't exist anymore. Soldiers would report that phenomenon, and I thought, what if the arm got lost at the same time his wife got lost? And what if he could hold her hand? And it was a beautiful, romantic, terrifying story about Barry and his friends thinking he was crazy because he could see his wife too, because he had also lost his eye, and she was slowly coming into a focus, and what a terrifying thing that might be. But I've long wrote horror stories, and I've constantly had the joy and thrill of working in the book industry. So I'm not going to sell you too much on the fact that I'm an author, but I am, and I can't avoid it, and I can't avoid self-promotion, so my apologies for that. But I want to talk to you a little bit about how my job has evolved as an author to get to Kobo, and to become the director of self-publishing and author relations. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things that I've learned about the book industry, and then spend most of our time answering questions that you have that you want to know about the book industry. So I was working at the McMaster University bookstore in 2006. And I live in Hamilton, so it was a nice, close commute for me. My son was 18 months old, and I was working in Toronto at the time, and I was tired of not ever seeing my son, so I took a job really close to home. And I learned that if we think that the book industry has its head up its ass sometimes, that's nothing like the academic side of the book industry that has its head up everyone's ass. Oh my God, it's being recorded. I said ass again. Bum. Butthole. Stupid things happen in the academic industry. Like, when you buy in supply chain for the book industry, when you buy a book, if you buy one book, you get a very short discount, 10%, or you don't get any discount. You have to buy 10 books in order to get a 20% discount. If you buy 20 books, then you get a 40% discount. And it's typical that most bookstores get a 40% discount. So if a book, just because I can't do math very well, if a book costs $100, the bookstore would pay $60, and then that $40 that they would get as their margin is what they would use to pay the rent, that would they use to pay for shipping, that would be used to pay their staff, to the credit card fee, all those things. In academic, they have a reverse sliding discount that works against supply and demand. And it took me 2 years of arguing and fighting with publishers before somebody finally admitted why I could buy one textbook and get a 40% discount, but if I bought more than 5 textbooks, I would only get a 20% discount, because academic bookstores only get a 20% discount. And they finally admitted it to me. And somebody from a university press said, well, that's because you guys don't have to work. The professor says what to buy. You don't have to do anything. It's a guaranteed sale. Oh, so you're going to rip us all off. And as the price of textbooks went up in order to curb used book pricing, for no good reason, publishers would do a new edition every 3 years. They'd started working on the next edition before the edition that is out is already there. And 9 times out of 10, they actually, all they did, they have to call it a new edition, they have to change it by 10%. I had a psychology textbook from 1992 in my first year in university. I was selling the 8th edition of that textbook when I was at McMaster University, same professor. I still had my original textbooks because I kind of a pack rat that way. And almost word for word, the chapters were there. But they switched the chapters. So chapter 1 in my edition was chapter 6 in the new edition. And they do that subterfuge to try and trick people into thinking they have to buy a new edition. So I rallied against that because my job at the university bookstore was to save students money, because the money we made at the bookstore went into student services. It actually supplied all the different clubs and societies. We funded them. That's how they got money to do the things they did. And other student services like health services on campus and things that were actually beneficial, like the student helpline and all those support mechanisms that are so critical for some students who need that extra help. And I was getting frustrated because the answer that publishers had was, well, we sold less textbooks this year than last year because of these damn used textbooks, which students have to do in order to survive. So to make more money, we're just going to increase the price. But then I got an espresso book machine. And an espresso book machine, how many of you guys know what an espresso book machine is? Actually, Alberta was the first province in the country to have an espresso book machine at the University of Alberta bookstore. Todd Anderson, a pioneer, a man I look up to so much, was the guy who got it. I came out to Edmonton, spent some time with him, convinced my university that we should spend $170,000 on this machine so I could save students millions of dollars. And we were the second McMaster to have one. And now there are probably 12 across Canada and over 75 located around the world. But this is how we use the machine. McGraw-Hill Ryerson, Canadian version of McGraw, when they had the rights to a book, a professor would pick a book. A professor would pick a textbook and go, there are 15 chapters in this book, but I am only going to read 8 of them. And a lot of students get frustrated because they spend all this money, $150 for a textbook, but I only read half the book. That is a ripoff. Why did I do that? But it was the best book possible, and that's why the professor picked it. But they knew they couldn't possibly read all of it because, God, this is just one class, right? We only have so much time. So they would do special custom editions, meaning the professor would say, I like this textbook, but I only want these 8 chapters. I don't want the students to have to buy more than they have to. And McGraw and Nelson and all the major publishers were doing these great editions, saving money, but they were still charging a lot of money. So when I got my espresso book machine, they gave me the print-ready PDF. And we were able to, they gave us 40% non-returnable because there's nothing to return. And I was printing them in my store. And what I did is I subtracted the cost of ink and paper from my 40%, and I brought my margin back down to 20%. And I reduced the sale price even further. So the original price of the textbook and the price I was selling this custom edition for was as low, it was like 50 to 60% cheaper than the original textbook price. And McGraw made more money selling these cheaper textbooks. And I made more money selling these books because I still didn't have the cost of receiving and all of the extra things associated with receiving and shipping and returning. And we sold more. Students won. We saved them millions of dollars. The publishers won. They sold more. And the bookstore won because people were buying them from us and not going to Amazon and buying them there. So we were actually able to fund student services. It was an amazing thing to do. And then I also learned that we could give away free digital versions of the textbook and still sell more print copies, provided that the print copy was a reasonable price. And some smart publishers did that with us, and it was an amazing thing to do. But then I learned that when I had a machine in my store that could print and bind books, that I could carry any local author's book at any time, and because it costs money to put books in inventory. It costs money. It's kind of borrowed money to have them. But I could always have your book virtually in stock, and in 15 minutes I could print your book from a digital file. So maybe I would print one and put it on display, or I would even have a display that said, this book is available in our store, just ask at the front cash desk. We'll print it for you. And half the time, if we had it on the shelf, they wanted to print the book so they could see it and touch it. It's like going to a bakery and seeing the bread and smelling it. And I saw thousands of books printed in my store over the years, and it was so exciting. It was like being at a birth every day. It was like, woohoo, this is exciting, without all the gross stuff and pain, without all the pain. And it was really, really exciting because the first version of the machine that we had made so much noise it sounded like a wood shop, because it would actually print the book block, print the cover. It would then pass it over glue, bind it, and then before it passed it over the glue, it would go over a blade that would rough up the edges so that the glue had places to settle. And it sounded like a wood shop. And so you'd be at cash and you'd hear this, and the customer would go, oh, are you guys doing construction? No, it's just printing books over there. And they would go, that was kind of cool. And I used to say, Amazon may ship it in 24 hours, but I'll get it for you in 15 minutes. And it was kind of cool. But I learned I could help local authors and we could do stuff together. And I always wanted to make sure when people came in and wanted to print books on the machine, I tried to talk them out of spending more money than they should. I always tried to say, do you have a business plan? You're going to spend $500 to get this book ready, and the design and layout and all the things that we need to do to get it ready. This is how many books you're going to have to sell before you make your money back. And I talked a lot of people out of printing a lot of books. I said, why don't you just print 10? And if you sell 10, come on back. You can order one. That's the ideal print run. And I learned that if you put authors first and you actually tried not to rip them off, if you tried to actually help them make money off this, that we could both make a lot of money together. And then I had a textbook that was originally an $86 textbook, Macroeconomics, written by Bill Scarth, who's the chair of our economics department. And Nelson was publishing this textbook for him. He had written it because he couldn't find a textbook for his fourth year class that he liked enough, so he wrote one. Nelson published it for him. And they were charging $86 for it. And he came to my office and he said, listen, I'm thinking of taking the rights back. I want to use your machine to print it here. But I have one catch. I have friends who teach courses in other universities and they want to buy my textbook for their class. Nelson refused to sell this custom edition to anyone but McMaster University for some bizarre red tape reason. They wouldn't sell it. And I was thinking, Bill, I'm a bookseller. I will sell any book to anyone, anywhere, so long as it's legal. And I said, well, how much do you make for every $86 book that sells? How much money do you get paid in royalties? He said, well, I get $8. So I took my calculator out and I looked at the cost of printing. He had the rights. Cool. Cost of printing this $300, a 300-page book, $8. I said, Bill, I will give you $8 for everyone we sell. I will sell this to other bookstores, non-returnable because it's print on demand. It's hard to do that. I will give them a 50% margin, which is unheard of in academic. It's a beautiful margin. Amazon gets it, but not everyone else gets it. And that was really, really cool to get. I said, and the reason I did that is because on the ones that I sold in my store, I said, I'm going to rip students off by charging them $24.95. I could charge a lot less, but then I wouldn't be able to give a discount to other bookstores. And then it gets too confusing because I'm an English major, not a math major. And I would rather pay you $8 consistently no matter how the book sells, so you always get the same amount of money. So it's not, well, if I sell it to another bookstore, you only get $4, but if I sell it myself, you get $8. And I'm like, who has time for that? So I purposely ripped off students and charged them $25 instead of $86. And not only did we go from selling 10 to a class of 40 to selling 40 to a class of 40, but we also had people demanding it around the world because he was a known economics dude. And I was shipping it to India, and I was shipping it to Australia and California and in New York, and I was shipping it all over the place to universities, and we were all making good money off of this, and students were actually happy. Shipping the book to places like Australia and California cost me a lot more money than I was able to make because the shipping costs we also absorbed, so the bookstores that we shipped to didn't have to pay. And I discovered Kobo allowed us to load them and make an ebook available. And then I realized the magic that I didn't have to factor the cost of paper. or distribution or warehousing or any of the things that physical limitations abide by. And we sold that for $10. And to this day, that bookstore and Bill are selling that textbook around the world for $10, and it's really exciting to see that. But I learned the magic of supply, unlimited supply with unlimited demand. And when Kobo was looking to start a self-publishing program, they were looking for somebody who understood the business, and I'd been in the business for a long enough time to kind of understand how cracked it was. And I'd been an author. And I had self-published, and I had used KDP, and I had used Smashwords, and I was familiar with the landscape, and I wanted to be able to remove the barriers for authors on Kobo to do the same thing. So I was hired in October 2011, basically to come up and find a solution for self-published authors to make it easy for them. And it was kind of cool. I was like, I had just quit my job at McMaster, and I had agreed to be a consultant to fly around the world to make a minimum of $150,000 a year. Just going and doing talks on how print on demand could save the publishing industry. And I loved it. It was amazing. I would only have to work 6 months of the year and make more money than I was making at McMaster. But I had done interviews with Kobo, and I thought I was a shoo-in for the job because I went and met with Michael Tamlin. We had breakfast, and he was describing the job. And I said, Michael, you realize you're describing me. There is no other person who could do this job but me, because I was very egotistical. And I had a great interview with him and one of the other VPs of the company, and then I never heard back from them. And I thought, God, I thought I had that job. I thought it was good. So then I ended up, it was such a good experience, I ended up quitting McMaster because they weren't about books anymore. They were about candles and T-shirts and stuff that I just can't get passionate about. I'm passionate about books, but I'm not passionate about knickknacks. I will buy them and put them in my house, but I'm not passionate, and I can't sell things I don't believe in. So I quit my job. I agreed to consult for on-demand books in New York and to fly around the world and work for my home office and make $1 bazillion a year doing nothing but talking, because I like talking. And then I got a call from Kobo the next week saying, we'd like to offer you the job. And I go, it's a lot less. But I get to build this business from scratch. Are you kidding me? So I talked to my wife, and she said, where will you be happiest? I said, I could be happy doing either one of these things. But I really admired Michael Tamlin, who is our current president, and Mike Serbinis, who is the original CEO. And I'd worked for Mike Serbinis at Chapters Indigo. He was the head of the technology department. And he was a Hamilton boy. So I kind of felt passionate towards him. And those are two leaders that I would follow into any battle, because they're smart and they have integrity and they have intelligence and they have compassion. And they're wonderful leaders. So I wanted to work with Michael was the president of Kobo Canada at one time when I was on the board. And so I had worked with him closely, and it's like, oh my God, but I get to work with him again. That's kind of cool, isn't it? So I got to Kobo, and I spent the first 6 months just kind of wandering around, talking to people, talking to authors, and saying, well, what should we do? Should we buy a solution? Should we build a solution? And we built Kobo Writing Life. KoboWritingLife.com is our blog, and Kobo Writing Life allows you, small publishers and authors, if they want. It removes the barriers. It's free. You can use it. You can set your own price in 8 different currencies. You get to keep 70%. Unless you price lower than $2.99, then you get to keep 45%. There is no cap. So if you want to write a textbook for an academic market and charge a reasonable price like $24.95 for a textbook, because digital textbooks are still stupidly priced at $100 and $75, why don't you keep 70% and make more money and save students money? And so we launched Kobo Writing Life in July of 2012. I was the only staff member on the Kobo Writing Life team. I had 5 developers working specifically for me. It was the very first time at Kobo. There's dedicated developers for any project, so I was really proud of the fact that I demonstrated that if, instead of flying the developers around and constantly changing their focus, if they were committed and focused to one particular tool, they could build a world-renowned dashboard with a great user experience and continue to work at revising it. So not just launch it and then go away, but every 6 to 8 weeks we add something, we change something, we fix something. And it's usually based on stuff that authors tell us doesn't work for them. And it's really, really exciting. It wasn't until last August. Now, I ended up having, after we launched Kobo Writing Life, a couple months after, I stole someone from the merchandising team, Shayna, and I stole someone from the publisher operations team, Christina, and it was just Shayna and Christina and I working for the longest time, and I was all over the place going and giving talks, and they were keeping the fort together from home office. And it wasn't until last August that I actually got a full complement of staff. Kobo Writing Life unit sales are the number 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 publisher in most of our territories around the world. Kobo Writing Life authors are selling more units than Random House Canada for Kobo in many territories. Now, the dollars coming in from those are less, because the average price point of a major publisher typically is $8 to $15, whereas the typical price point from independent authors averages around $6. So the unit sales are much higher, but of course the dollars are lower scale, but they're still within the top 10. So I was able to convince them that I needed staff. So I now have a manager in the U.S., an ex-literary agent, Christine Monroe. And the sort of the main thing, I had interviewed people who had 30 years of publishing experience, knew the business inside out, were amazing individuals, and I loved them and I adored them. But the one thing they didn't have the desire to nurture and care for and work collaboratively with authors. And that was the one thing that wasn't in the job description that I was looking for in them. And Chrissy had it. And Diego, who I kind of stole from Amazon, had that. He was working in the UK. He was working with one of the Waterstones, with the retailer, and he was doing the same sort of job but for them, but he never had the opportunity to do the things he wanted to do to help authors. And Cami, my European manager in France, was doing stuff with a publishers group. She was the digital contact for small publishers in France. And she had that passion and that care and that concern for authors. We will never, ever be as big or as powerful and have as deep pockets as Amazon has. But the one thing that we will have is we will have passion and a commitment to sit one-on-one with people when we get a chance. Is it scalable? Can I sit, and that's the challenge that I always have, can I sit with every single author who's on our platform? I can't. But what I can do is I can reward the authors smart enough to come to a convention where it's all about networking and connecting with other authors and with publishers and with agents and with other writers and with artists and editors and all the amazing people in our industry. I can do my best to spend face time with these people because serendipity in our industry is critical. Connecting with local bookstores, with local libraries, with other writers, with editors, with other people in the industry will be the long-term strategy that you use to be successful in this industry. And the one thing we will always be able to do is have a personal touch. Not with everyone, and I'm not allowed to touch people anymore because I got in trouble with HR. But I'm a huggy kind of guy, and that's what I do. I get in trouble for it sometimes. But that's the thing that we can do. We can't be bigger, stronger, faster, but we can always commit to being passionate about trying to help authors. One of the joys that I have in my job is working with an author who hasn't had any sales and doing what we can to be honest with them, to help them actually achieve that. If I can do that and help an author get the path to success, I strongly believe in karma. It's a Roman Catholic thing. Karma is very popular for Roman Catholics. But I honestly believe I will go on the K-boards, for example, the Kindle board. It used to be called the Kindle boards, and now on the K-boards. And I just watch what authors do. And when I see authors out there trying to help other authors, you know what I want to do? I want to help that author. I want to help those who give first and don't ask. I want to do those things. So that's just a little bit of a background about me, a little bit about Kobo Writing Life, and I'm hoping you guys have questions that what you want to know about the industry, about Kobo, about my amazing book, iDeath, that's being launched this afternoon. Oh, sorry, that was self-promotion. But no, any questions? And I will have to repeat the question because we're being recorded. Yes? The question is, with Kobo, does it make it easier for authors to self-publish? Yeah, so prior to Kobo Writing Life existing, you would have to contact Kobo, just like a big publisher would. You would have to go through contract negotiations, which could take 3 to 4 weeks. Then you would have to fill out, if you didn't know, Onyx, which is an XML-based industry standard book file that would actually submit data into good intent. This is the way you're supposed to do it. Most people can't do that. So we created an Excel spreadsheet. Which I actually created for the industry back when I was on the board years ago when I said, well, they can't send data properly. Why don't we just make them a template. Everyone has Excel. So that actually became the standard across the industry, so I'm kind of proud of. So you can blame me for that. You'd have to fill out an Excel spreadsheet, learn how to FTP. Not a lot of people know how to FTP. Put your files in. So if you wanted to be a vendor on Kobo, anyone could, but it could take you 6 to 8 weeks before your books got live. That's bullshit. Most small publishers, most authors do not have an IT department. Random House does, and HarperCollins and all these other publishers do. They have lawyers too, and all that other stuff to go through all that. So what we did is, well, why don't we do a one-size-fits-all contract? We actually followed the original contract that we offered to all publishers. We actually humanized it and put it in somewhat English to try and make it easier to understand. And then we kept the platform. You go on now at 2 a.m, nobody's in the office that you have to talk to. You can log on, create an account for free, enter your banking information. The one thing we won't let you do is we won't let you publish until you've entered your banking information. Because we would actually like to be able to pay you if your books sell. So I think it is easier. Now, the sort of long answer to that, because this has been a short answer so far, is just because you can publish doesn't mean you should. And the one thing I will always advise is I will remove the barriers and try and make it as easy as possible for anyone to realize their dream to publish. But I don't want you to do it at the expense of you as a writer, and I would please implore you to at the very least get somebody to read it first, a third unbiased party, ideally somebody to edit, and the different types of editing, not just proofread, but maybe substantive edit is needed, an honest integrity. If any of you have done any of the workshops that were here, like the Open Slush, feedback from a peer writing group, from anything. I wrote an amazing novel, I, Death. I thought it was pretty damn good. And Ian, my publisher and editor, took a manuscript that I thought was pretty good, and he made it great. I think it's awesome, but I'm only going to say great. He took something good and he made it better. When I did things that I thought were genius, he smacked me in the head and said, "You idiot, nobody likes that. What the hell is that?" But he helped, in a nice way, he did it, because he's a nice guy who walks out of my seminars at the beginning. But... And I will fight and struggle with an editor, but that's part of the creative process, is that process to say, take something that's good and make it even better. And the same thing happened with me with Dundurn, where I refused to take... I had the history of the bookstores and libraries I was writing, like the 5 generations of this family that owned this bookstore, and I was just going on thousands of words, and the editor goes, "Well, you don't even get to the ghost until 6 pages into the chapter. People might want the ghost." And I was like, "Yeah, but it's the books, the love, the people," and because I'm really passionate about that. And they said, "All right." They did sidebars, so I could still include the history. So those book nerds like me who wanted that could have it, but they also taught me how to cut to the chase. And I fought with them, and I argued like a egotistical author. And then when I finally saw that version where they did that work, and I looked at it and I went, "Oh my God, you guys were so right. I'm so sorry. I was such a jerk. This is a way better book than the one I turned in." And that is something that happens. So if you can have that, you can actually realize your dream and have someone work with you. I say there's nothing about self-publishing. It does take a collaborative spirit. So that was a short answer. The question is, so Adrienne Kerr, during her workshop, said that BookNet Canada provides really valuable feedback to publishers. And she recommended that's a great place. But currently, there isn't a way for self-published authors to get into BookNet. Believe it or not, I was on the board of BookNet Canada as the representative of the Canadian Booksellers Association. I'm no longer. I retired this year after 6 beautiful years there. We're looking to try and get representatives from e-retailers and eBooks on. The challenge is, Kobo's willing to put me on the board, but it doesn't make sense to have one company represented. BookNet is very inclusive. Amazon and Apple don't yet want to play nice. They want to keep all their data restricted. Kobo's the only player that wants to play. Until we get other players on board so we can be unbiased. Like when I was on the board of directors, I had to represent all bookstores. Mom and pop, big bookstores, little bookstores, academic, and I had to keep that in mind because I was representing everyone. I can't represent iBooks and Kindle. So that's one of the challenges, and there are things available that I know BookNet is working on to try and work with indie authors, and I'm probably a voice they turn to ask how could we do this, and I look forward to that. Some of the data we're trying to give you with Kobo Writing Life, we can give you the same sort of data that publishers get. Actually, in some cases, you get more than the publishers get because they can't consume all the data they get because they have lots of authors. You care about your books more than anyone. And we are also looking at ways to give you more. But we're only going to be able to give it to you for Kobo. We can't give it to you for Apple and Nook and all the other places. So, good question. Thank you. Mr. Ian.
Just to be devil's advocate.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Why, if I'm an independent small publisher or an independent author, why should I bother with Kobo? I mean, aren't you like the fourth biggest player maybe?
Okay. Good question. So Ian said, Mark, you are awesome and Kobo is the coolest place in the world. Ian said, if I'm a small publisher or an independent author, why should I bother with Kobo? I mean, Amazon owns the market. Let's be honest. They're a giant player. They own the market. And why should I even bother with this Canadian company that's trying to do that? And Apple is there and Google and all these other players. Why should I bother with Kobo? One of the answers is, if your books are on Amazon, you will have access to Amazon customers 100% of the time every day. You will have 0% access to Nook's customers and Apple's customers and Kobo's customers 100% of the time because it won't be available. There are authors who sell more on Kobo than they do on Amazon. They're the exception. I'll be honest with you. Amazon is a gigantic player with a bazillion customers around the world. But there are authors who make more on Kobo than they do on Amazon. There are authors who make more on Nook than they make on Amazon or Kobo or iBooks. And there are authors who make more on iBooks. And the interesting thing is there are some authors who come to me and admit, they say, well, Amazon's my number one vendor in U.S. sales. Kobo's my number one vendor in Canadian sales. iBooks is my number one vendor in UK sales. And Kobo is my number 2 in Australia. And Nook is my number 2 in the US. And I love that dynamic. I think it's really, really important for authors and publishers not to put all their eggs in one basket. And one of the examples that I would use is, imagine if you had a movie available and it was a direct to DVD release, and you only made it available through Blockbuster. Yeah. Imagine if you only had your books available through Borders, second biggest chain in the U.S. Why, pray tell, would you only make your books available in a single retailer and give them all of the power and all of the control? And then they send you an email today asking you to spam a big publisher and completely get blacklisted from ever publishing with them again, which would benefit who? And I'm not taking sides with Hachette or Amazon. I equate the fight that Amazon and Hachette are having with the Hulk and Thor having a fight in Manhattan. They're going to fight. They're going to destroy the neighborhoods. They're going to kill innocent bystanders in the process. And then the next day, they're both going to be standing strong and proud, and they're going to be friends again and fight alongside each other and work as partners. And a whole bunch of authors are going to get caught in the fray and have people shit all over them because they chose to take a stand for either Amazon or for Hachette. And that is really unfair. We as authors have become pawns with two major players who both have good points. I would argue personally that maybe big publishers are charging too much for books, and maybe independent publishers are charging too little for books. And somewhere in the middle is the real answer. But that's my personal opinion, not Kobo's opinion. And it's really, really hard to take sides. So that was a short answer for why you should publish to Kobo, with no additional things that I threw in. Melanie.
It's not a question so much as just a comment, because I follow some authors online who have basically praised Kobo and openly say that Kobo is their main source of income. Patty Jansen in Australia
Australia, yep.
And Hugh Howey, before we got a big deal, he was big Kobo back.
He still loves us. He still loves us. Thank you. So Melanie said, Kobo's awesome and Mark is really handsome. No, she was saying that there are some authors. Patty Jansen, for example, an Australian author, actually does really, really well on Kobo and has long been an advocate for Kobo. Steve Vernon, a Halifax horror author, actually does way better on Kobo than he does on Amazon. And Hugh Howey, even though I'm sure he does make a lot more money off of Amazon, is still open and friendly and does really want to see a lot of us succeed. Yes, he stands behind Amazon. Guess what? Amazon helped launch his career. Of course he's going to stand behind them. But he also is friendly and open. Funny aside, I was at the Romance Writers Association party, and I crashed the Amazon party for authors, although I didn't crash it because I am an Amazon author, but my name tag said Kobo. And I hadn't met the head of CreateSpace. I know all the other guys from Amazon that do self-publishing. And Hugh thought it would be funny to talk Dave into kicking me out of the room, forcibly removing me from the room as the enemy, Kobo. And I thought it would have been hilarious. Dave refused to do it, but I thought I would have made a big stink, saying, "How dare you throw me out? I make $10 a month on Amazon." But it was funny. But then they introduced me, and I said, "Well, you should have kicked me out. That would have been funny." And then maybe Publishers Weekly would have wrote about it, and it would have been cool. And then Kobo would, people in the U.S. would go, "Oh, what's this Kobo?" I should say, Kobo. Does anyone know where the term Kobo comes from? Yeah. It is an anagram for a book. You win a prize. Awesome. That was amazing. Yeah, Kobo, anagram for book. Isn't that exciting? Because we're now owned by a Japanese company, people think it's a Japanese term, but Kobo is an anagram for book. I always thought it was you can have the book your way, or our way, just a different way. Any other questions? So the espresso book machine that I used to own, that the bookstore I worked for used to own, is now unplugged and collecting dust in the basement. I'm considering buying it myself. Those idiots don't know how to use it. I am working with service providers to try and come up with a solution for authors at Kobo who want a print book, to try and make it as easy as CreateSpace is. And we potentially have a solution where you could push a button and all your metadata and your EPUB would go into a file. You would pick a template, romance, thriller, mystery, whatever, and have a print-ready file ready to go so you could have print books too. We're not there yet because we could do it now, but it would be so painful you would kill us. But then trying to help you get distribution. So we are working on those solutions, and the espresso is not the way to do that. But there are other people out there ready to help you. Did you have a question as well?
From a marketing standpoint, we know that it's not just about selling your book, it's about selling you as the author and giving that as a persona or image. So do you find that compared to traditional publishing versus self-publishing, that self-publishing allows you to be more true to yourself, or do you have to fit more of a mold when you're going to mold more to regular publishing?
So the question is, the comment is that authors usually have to create a persona for themselves, a marketing image. It's not about selling your book, it's about selling you, which I say is very, very valid and very true. Because people don't buy books, they buy authors' books. The question is it more important for independent authors as opposed to traditionally published authors to do a brand? Is that the question? More freedom. Okay. Can you be more true to yourself? Yes and no. Publishers are amazing. If you get to work with an editor like Adrian or editor like Ian, Ian's letting me make my book available on Wattpad 100% for free. He bought the rights to my book. He is the publisher. I have no say. And yet, we have a very flexible, beautiful marriage relationship. I adore him. I have less control with Dundurn, which is a larger publisher. I do have some say, but very little. For my persona as an author, fortunately, Ian and Dundurn, my publishers, allow me to have my persona. I have Barnaby, a life-size skeleton that travels with me. He's not here today, but he may make an appearance later at my book signing. My skull ties and the things that I do to show that I'm a horror author. And one of the reasons I do that is you see me sitting at a table in a mall, and there's a skeleton sitting beside me. You either know to avoid the crazy man, Or you go, hey, that's neat, he must write something creepy. So the right people are attracted to come talk to me, and the right people run screaming from the maniac. And it's also a wonderful icebreaker. I think you have more freedom. So for example, when a snafu happened with, Ian and myself for the book, I had the flexibility to come up with solutions with him on what I could do. One of the solutions is, why don't I give people the entire book for free in PDF and EPUB? I would never be able to talk a publisher into being able to do something that flexible, because I would lose the freedom to be me. And to be me is to say, you deserve more, I want to give you more. I may not always get that. I was on a radio program for Spooky Sudbury in Sudbury last year for an hour during rush hour with a morning show host, which is usually the most popular show of the day. I was in studio for an hour talking about my book. People were calling in and sharing their own spooky stories. An hour on radio. Imagine how much that would cost, even to just get an ad for 30 seconds. And Dunder, and God bless their hearts, they set it up. The publicist set it up, and they sent them a book to give away. I went to Costco because I could get it cheaper there than I could buy it from the publisher, and I bought another 5 copies, and I made T-shirts, and I brought in swag and all kinds of stuff, so we could give away 6 prizes, and everyone got a T-shirt and a book and a pen and and all the extra stuff. That's the freedom. Now, fortunately, I had that freedom. It allowed me to be me, but you may not always have those freedoms. Neil Gaiman has a contract that says he has to wear black hair. No, he does that himself, but it's But I think there are more freedoms when you're independently published, and you can choose your own path a little bit better, although the publisher can help you with that as well. So you still need that as an author. And I would argue, as an author, people don't care about you saying on Twitter, for example, buy my book, but they may be interested in something you share, something you're passionate about. Of course you're passionate about your book. But when I look at a Twitter account and somebody follows me, if I have a chance to look at their account, because sometimes I don't see it, I'll look at their stream and I'll see, what value does this author bring into my day for neat things that I'm interested in, which are bookish and spooky and stuff like that, or publishing or whatever. And if in that one page that I see nothing but self-promotional BS, I'm probably not going to follow that author. If I see a combination of self-promotional BS and neat things, I'll probably follow that author. But that's the thing. I will follow an author who brings me value. I will buy books by authors who bring value into my life. And so the question in marketing is often, what value do you give that customer? The question as an author is, what do I bring to that target audience? And that's sorry, I'm launching into marketing again, but thanks for the question. Was it good? Did you like it? Okay, cool. It's 10 minutes, so maybe one more question, and then you can all come and hug me. Okay, question. No, I thought you had a question. Yeah, sorry. Okay. The question is regarding to rights, the differences in rights when you sell a book to a publisher versus when you self-publish, etc. A couple things I will advise you on rights. Typically, when you self-publish with Kindle and Kobo, I'll use as 2 examples, you own all the rights, and you allow this retailer, the retailer is not your publisher, you are the publisher. You allow this retailer to sell your book, and you can take that away at any time. You do give up certain rights if you sign up to KDP Select, Amazon's exclusivity program, where for 90 days you can't sell it anywhere else, and I'm being told the hook's coming to take me off. But for the most part, when you sell a book to a publisher, you are giving them the rights, and usually all of the rights, to publish the book. And I would advise that there are clauses you should look into. Christine Catherine Rush has a blog called The Business Rush, R-U-S-C-H, R-U-S-C, I think Rush. Christine Catherine Rush. And she compiled most of her material from that blog, Free Advice, into Deal Breakers, an ebook that is available, and a print book that's available. And you're kicking me out? Okay, I'm sorry. I guess I have to go. Oh, sorry. Deal Breakers. Check out Deal Breakers. There are clauses in the contract you need to be aware of. Thank you guys very much. Now I hug people.